We're now going to take a couple of questions from the audience, and it will be the same format with 2 minutes to respond from each candidate. Deborah Gold.
Thank you. I feel privileged to be permitted to ask a question of all of you. Those of you who are not familiar with me, I am the Vice Chair of the Wake County Board of Education. And as someone who spends my life immersed in academia and politics with an absolute focus on academic achievement and success, and academic achievement meaning future success for our students and for our families, I have not heard, except from two of you, any slight mention about education. So my question for you is very simple. How do you see the role of the federal government in regard to education?
As a parent and a resident of Wake County, I have very strong opinions about education and what is and frankly should be and must be a local issue. As your congressional representative and as someone who's swearing to uphold the Constitution, I can tell you that the federal government does not have a constitutional role in education of our children. And I look at the destructive side effects of having the federal government butt in. I was talking to administrators and teachers 2 years ago about the consequences of No Child Left Behind. And I had people who were telling me point blank, our busing policy in Wake County has nothing to do with diversity. All that's going on is we've gotten very good at predicting which kids need help. And instead of addressing those children's needs, we spread them all out over the district to effectively load balance our neediest students so that on average, our schools hit their average yearly progress targets and we avoid being beaten by the federal government's stick. That's dangerous and irresponsible, right? If I as a physician try to hide my sickest patients by spreading them throughout the hospital instead of putting them in the ICU where they get the care they need, I'm not doing my patients a service. That's the way we see the federal government being involved in education. So when you look at our money that we spend to fund the Department of Education, folks, we need to keep our resources locally. And when you look at what it costs to fund the Department of Education in Washington, and then the money that we get back, and the strings that come with that money, we need to empower Deborah Goldman and John Tedesco and Ron Margiotta and all the other folks in our school board who care about the children to do the right thing and to provide the local educational alternatives and the vouchers and the school choice and the competing public and private schools to give kids everywhere the choice to get an excellent education. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want. When I talk to everybody, regardless of where they are in the political spectrum, we all want safe communities, great schools for our kids, and economic opportunity for their future.
First, a reality check. Our education system is overwhelmingly state and locally financed and administered. That's the way it is, and I think that's the way we all want it to be. Only 7 cents of education, each education dollar, is a federal expenditure. Now, I think we're best served by taking a practical and targeted and strategic approach to that federal role as opposed to trafficking in political dogma. There are challenges that our education systems nationwide face in terms of world competition, in terms of the standards that our kids are going to have to meet. And there are things that the right kind of federal support can help us achieve. I, for example, I gather my opponent opposes Head Start. I do not. I think that focus on early childhood is well conceived and extremely important. I think the Title I support for economically disadvantaged systems and students is important. I think the magnet school system is important, and it's important for there to be some federal support, some shared support for that. I think we've got to have a national push in science and math education, and there too, it's mainly state and local, but there are things the National Science Foundation can do to encourage excellence, to encourage the dissemination of best practices. We simply cannot disarm in the face of the international competition. So it needs to be practical, targeted, strategic, but there is a critical federal role, and we're better served by really thinking about that and talking about it and learning from experience than we are from simply making blanket pronouncements about government at one level or another being incompetent or evil. And then finally, we didn't get into higher education, but I obviously think that our reform of the student loan program and our support of world-class research through the NIH and the NSF, I also think that's critical. In fact, the research that we do, the public and private research establishment of this country, is probably our greatest competitive advantage internationally.
I'm one of the candidates who had already mentioned education, and I understand very